Yeah, looks like we're going to be recording on. Yep. Okay, got it. Okay, so we have enough people. Now I got 17, so I got to see who I don't have on my list. We have enough to get going. So again, sorry for the delay. It is 4:04, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have quorum. The first item on the agenda is acceptance of the minutes. If somebody wants to make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make a motion. Yeah.
Arnie? I'll take a second.
Second.
I'll second, Richard.
Okay. All in favor? Signify by
Aye.
saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to, oh, wait, let me screen share. Make sure you can, oops.
Sharon, can you make Eric a presenter or enable him? He's going to share his screen, most of the slide. He's covering most of the slides, so he'll share.
Yeah, he should be able to share now.
Okay.
You got it, Eric? Let me know. Yep, there you go. Okay. So if I go off camera, it's just because I'm trying to coordinate that what happened to us doesn't happen to my meeting at 7 o'clock tonight. So, but I'm here and I'm listening.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Good to see you all again. Believe it or not, it's our 13th meeting. And so let's jump right into things. Next slide. Our agenda this evening is to cover economic development findings. Eric Halverson from RKG is here. His team has done a lot of work in this area. I think some of it will look familiar because we covered some of this ground several months ago in part with some of the demographics work that we did, land use work. So we're really building upon that. But there is some new information here I hope will be informative. Following that, Marcy will give an update on where we're at with public engagement, and we do have some activities planned. So we're very eager to share that information with you and recruit you in the process of promoting some of the events that we have planned. And then finally, we'll just give you an update on the status of the affordable housing plan. And like we usually do, we'll talk about our next steps. Okay, next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I would call the ecosystem that surrounds economic development. And just to really dip our toes into the water of this, we profiled a few entities that are across the city and beyond that are very involved in the economic development scene in Danbury, which isn't to say that these are the only players, but these folks are central. And so that includes at the state level, includes DCD, which offers grant programs and other types of programs to assist communities with economic development related activity. WestCog, which is engaged in economic development planning for the region, including the region's SED plan, which is the economic development plan for the region. And then locally, with the City of Danbury, Office of Business Advocacy, and we spoke with Roger last week, had a conversation with him about some of the major trends and the role that office plays. Regionally, again, with PJ's organization, Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce, and PJ, I'll follow up with an email. I'd like for Eric and myself to carve out some time and have a conversation with you as well, if that works for you.
Absolutely, look forward to it.
Great, thank you. And then more locally, City Center Danbury, which is the downtown's special services district. And then operating on the private side are various local financial institutions and lenders that play a really important role in economic development. So it's this whole ecosystem that makes possible what has been occurring in Danbury, and that we're going to need to look to leverage future reinvestment in the city. Next slide. So starting with the Office of Business Advocacy, I think many of you are familiar with its role in operations, but I don't want to make assumptions here. So very quickly, I'll get you oriented with them. And this is coming off the conversation that Eric and I had with Roger last week. The office is basically the city's economic development arm, and it supports economic development through the city and acts as a liaison between city government and businesses. And in our conversation with Roger, he seemed very engaged in helping businesses find space, and of which we understand space is at a premium right now. And I don't know, is Roger on the call? I don't see him.
No, we were on a
Okay.
call earlier today, and I knew he was going to try to get on. He had obviously, had a long conversation with both you and Eric.
So I think if anything, Roger impressed upon us just how much activity there is right now in the city of Danbury with respect to economic development, and how his office really it facilitates that development as a liaison to businesses. In addition to that, the office is engaged with workforce development, addressing transportation needs related to businesses and employees, and infrastructure as well, supporting businesses. It's a small office, but it's very, very active. Next slide. The Chamber of Commerce, of course, the regional entity. And well, PJ, I've got you on right now. Do you want to take a minute to tell everyone a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of weird looking at my face right now on that slideshow. Sure. So I'll give a 30,000 foot view. We're 10-town region within the greater Danbury area. So we go as far north as Bridgewater and Sherman, and the southern portions of Reading and Richfield, and our eastern flank, as I refer to it, is Newtown. So we've got a diverse group of businesses within that region, as small as solopreneurs, entrepreneurs with one employees for businesses, as big as the hospital, right? New Vance, who's got close to, I think, 10,000 employees now under their account. So we sort of refer to ourselves as the conduit between all the type of businesses, focusing on business to business opportunities and networking, as well as providing educational opportunities for our members, including our Leadership Danbury program, which I think some of you on here are alumni of the Leadership Danbury program, which is a great offering that we provide to the employers throughout our area, and really just sort of trying to connect resources and being that go-to source for economic development, as well as sort of fostering any type of business promotions within our organizations. We work on workforce development as well. I noticed that was mentioned in the slide for Office of Economic Development, but we partner with the Northwest Regional Workforce Investment Board and work as sort of the boots on the ground to connect the employers with resources that exist within the Workforce Board and the Department of Labor as well. And our general networking events as well that we hold monthly. I mean, obviously the past 19 months have been a little bit unique in the sense of holding some of these virtually, but our bread and butter are the connections and networking opportunities that we present to our members. So that's kind of it in a high level. I'm happy to dive into it deeper if you like, but I could probably bore everyone if I wanted to continue further.
No, thanks for providing an overview. It helps us understand what kind of resources that the city and that businesses within the city have to draw up on. So thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
And then the next slide is City Center Danbury. City Center Danbury is an entity that is made possible in part by the state's special service district legislation, which enables the establishment of a special services or business improvement district. And basically the way that works is that property owners vote to participate in the district. And if you have a certain share of property voters approving or voting to join or establish a district, there's a small tax levy on top of the regular property taxes that helps fund the services of the district. So City Center Danbury, it helps recruit businesses to fill vacancies, works on beautification. There are street ambassadors that are out on the street that can assist people while they're maintaining the area as well. And basically the vision is to create or continue to foster a downtown that's vibrant, that's active, that's safe, clean, and very welcoming. And so that's the role. There are a few other cities across Connecticut that have bids. City of Hartford has one. Waterbury does not. So it's not universal, but you do have one here in Danbury, and that is City Center Danbury. Okay, next slide. So I'd like to talk about some recent economic development successes, because there are actually many, and there's been a lot of activity in Danbury over the past several years, and COVID-19 has not slowed down Danbury much at all with respect to economic development. In fact, quite the opposite. As we understand it, the commercial vacancy rate going into COVID was around 40%, and that has since contracted to 10% over the last 18 months, which is a very good figure. Now, much of that would be attributed to the Summit property being leased up to Nuvance Health, but that's certainly not the only property that's been filled in that duration. So that's a very, very good direction to have been headed in, particularly over the last year and a half. As I mentioned, Nuvance Health, they are leasing 220,000 square feet. So that's almost 250,000 square feet at the Summit, and that's a long-term lease. It's a 12-year lease with an option to expand to 300,000 square feet. So that's a tremendous investment, and that's an incredible win for the Summit property and for Danbury as well. But that's not the only sizable development in Danbury over the past few years. There's been $36 million invested into 100,000 square feet for Encompass Health, a rehab hospital that's been approved at the Reserve, which is very close to the Summit, of course. Parker Medical is leasing up to 88,000 square feet for manufacturing and components for the medical industry. Amazon has opened up a 100,000 square feet last mile distribution facility at the old Scholastic Books facility. And Danbury Fair Mall, while like many malls, it's struggling to reinvent itself in the new era of online retail. It's seeing new tenants come in, particularly some restaurant tenants. It's had re-tenanting of stores inside the mall, and it continues to approach the city with ideas on how it can reinvent the space and the land use. So I think there's a lot of promise there. And there are planned facilities as well, and substantial facilities, including an $80 million Danbury proton beam treatment facility at 85 Worcester Heights. And for those of you that don't know much about these, this is a radiation therapy for cancers and other diseases. And there are very few of these on the East Coast. I think the closest ones to Connecticut are in Boston and New Jersey, I believe. So this would be a facility that would draw people from across the region, from upstate New York to Western New England, and it would be very, very significant to the local medical care system. Sharon, is there anything that I'm completely glossing over here that I should mention?
I don't think so. Just, again, we have a lot of businesses that open up on the smaller level than this. So, we just keep moving. Roger is on now, so I don't know if he wants to add anything.
Yeah, Roger, please do. We try to get everything we talked about written down here, but I might be missing something smaller, maybe something that's pending. So feel free to chime in here.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up. I'm sorry it took me so long to get on here. I'm sitting waiting to get let into the meeting, and I'm going, what the heck is going on? And I go back and I look to my my mail and said, "Oh, new POCD link." I said, okay, thanks. So
Sorry, we got
I
hacked. You don't want to
apologize.
hear the story, so
Okay.
let you continue.
Good. I'll listen to it later. No, yeah, it looks like you got a lot of the big ones here. You know, the key is that the summit is bringing in all sizes of industries into its portfolio, anywhere from 40 employees up to, you know, hundreds when you include Nuvance.
Right.
That's just in one site. Our vacancy rates are ridiculously low citywide. We have so many businesses that are trying to come into Danbury that either through my office or through nearly every commercial realtor are looking for a place to fit them into a new home. And it's not that easy. It's not the easiest thing to do because, you know, even through last year's, you know, experience with COVID, that still remains. But it, you know, last year we went from probably closed the gap to our current rate during last year up through Christmas. It was remarkable how many places that filled in last year, whether it was just storage or it was warehousing or distribution. So that alone during absolute chaotic time was impressive for Danbury. Right now, you know, going back to the summit, it's going to be, by last meeting with them, said that they would be over 90% occupied by the end of 2021, are committed to be occupied by the end of 2021. And that's over 650,000 square feet of commercial space, which is terrific. On the smaller side, we have it everywhere, from mall occupancies getting filled with newer and smaller retail tenants. Our downtown is starting to fill in with smaller specialty tenants, and pretty much every major artery in Danbury is filling in. So right now it's handling the growth and handling the demand for space.
Okay.
Okay.
Francisco?
Thanks for giving the overview. Paul, go ahead, please.
Yeah, there's also a couple of things that are of a lot of interest in the Sixth Ward to consumers. The new Caralucci's going in on Mill Plain. There's a car restoration building under construction. I think it's like 25,000 square feet on Maybrook. The new Mercedes-Benz dealership, potential dealership on the corner of Sugar Hollow and Maybrook. And also, I've been approached about some vacant land on Sawmill. I think it's the last Farrington piece. It's 40 acres down there that somebody in the city wants to turn into housing. It's IL-40 right now. So I don't know what's going to happen to that. But there clearly is, just to echo Roger, there clearly is a tremendous amount of interest, tremendous amount of interest in this city. It's mind-boggling. And a lot of that's happening in the Sixth Ward, which is my ward, but it's actually happening all over the place. But yeah, there's just, you know, you like to say that you want to manage a growing city instead of a shrinking one, but Danbury's not really growing. It's more like exploding. Anyway, there is a lot of activity. Yeah. Yeah,
and if Paul, if I can just expand on that, I was going to mention that earlier. It's as if there's this quiet automobile corridor being built in your ward with North American Motor Car, Glickenhaus Automobile, which makes incredibly high-end cars, Speed Sport tuning. You've got, you know, obviously the existing dealerships and the prospect of potential new dealerships. So I think it's worth sort of taking note of that and recognizing it to see if there's something that we could leverage in terms of bringing more economic development in that industry.
Yeah, we are, PJ, and we're also, there's some concern about displacing airport activity, which we want to really maintain. It's pretty sensitive over there, but also it's at the bottom of a hill that's entirely residential, and there is some I don't want to call it anxiety, but some concerns about the car dealerships not testing their cars or doing test drives in those neighborhoods. So it's something that needs to be managed, encouraged, but managed, like anything else.
Yeah, just on that, Paul, I've made sure that I've made that clear to everyone there. The Glicken House, even though I want to be one of the first to go down the runway of the airport with those cars, that they do not test drive their vehicles on the residential streets at all, and they are more than cooperating. The old Sports Authority building, everybody keeps looking at and going by, and that is going to be a car dealership as well. I have, spoken with them. It's going to tentatively, as soon as they submit their plans, another large car, large make car dealership. So you have an entire row there of high-end vehicles, in addition to what PJ mentioned as far as specialty cars and services. So we're creating these little niche areas within the city that are just growing. We don't like to say totally organically, because we like to, say that we are paying attention to what the demand is and the need, and trying to focus those spaces to draw, like-minded businesses around them. So that way it builds a little bit of a community within itself. So we look forward to trying to work with all our new business communities. We have the mall that goes through is going through transitions, as they all are around the country. We have the Mill Plain corridor that you mentioned with Carluzzi's, that is starting to fill in vacancies where in empty areas where there was nothing. Just before the end of October, we had the announcement that the 27 acres on Mill Plain Road is going to have some, plans submitted to get considered for development. That's been sitting empty for, there was never anything on it. So it's been vacant land forever, unless it was a farm at one point. I really don't know. But all of these are exciting. And, at the same time, I'm working closely with the state of Connecticut, especially now with the infrastructure monies that are getting awarded to the state of Connecticut and other states around the country, that Danbury remains in the crosshairs for some of that money. We want to make sure that we're able to handle the development that's coming in. We like to have a nice managed system of growth here, but the demand is such that we have to try to keep up with. So, and we're doing, I think every department within the city is doing its best to do just that, and we've done a remarkable job. I love hearing business owners that have experience with the city saying that, we've never had the cooperation in any other town or state that they've had in the city of Danbury, which is terrific. Now we always have a handful are going, why are you giving me a hard time, but our departments go above and beyond to try to make sure that the experience of our business community is always a positive one. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Roger.
Mhm.
All right, well, let's keep moving forward. There are, in addition to all the business development activity, there's some really, really big infrastructure pieces that might have a big impact on Danbury. And we spoke with Roger, Eric and I spoke with Roger a couple hours after this picture was taken on the right. This was a press conference basically announcing, potential funding for the Maybrook line. And for those of you that aren't familiar, the Maybrook rail line is an existing rail line that links Danbury to Brewster, New York and beyond. And it is a route that's being studied for extension of Metro North service to connect Danbury to the Harlem line, which would shorten commuting times and also offer a reverse commute into Danbury from New York State. So the announcement of the infrastructure passage is very exciting because it's promising for actually funding the development of this line. So I'd like to show you a map. If we go to the next slide of what that looks like, so it can get us thinking about where the opportunities may be. So downtown Barry, the line comes into downtown to the where the existing Metro North station is, and it basically mirrors 84 all the way out to Brewster, New York, where it would meet up with the Southeast Station, which is on the Harlem line. It's a 14-mile stretch, and it happens to travel right through the west side of Danbury, not far from the mall, not far from the Summit property, not far from really what is hundreds of thousands of square feet of new development, of hundreds of new homes, and a significant investment in the western part of the city. Now, the study is, I don't even know if how far the study is along because we couldn't find anything, but it may be that there is potential, or it may be that the POCD takes a role in advocating for the development of a station on the west side of the city, in addition to a station downtown, presumably where the existing station is or nearby. So that's something I'd like to get you thinking about. It's not only the connection to New York, but what does that do in providing transit access at the west side of the city, and what could that mean for the mall and the Summit and everything that's out in that part of the city?
Francisco.
Oh, go ahead.
Yep. Go ahead.
The Westchester County Executive is going to be presenting the study to the public on December 6th.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say that it's, in addition to shortening the commuting time, there's also the frequency of trains,
Right.
heading into the city is just as important as I think the 20 minutes shorter commute that it takes, because there are a lot of different options to, get into the city and then get back home versus, the Danbury line into Norwalk.
Great. Yeah, that's a very important point. Thank you, Sharon.
It is the reason most of the New York City and Westchester commuters choose to drive 84 to get to that Harlem line, is because they need to know that they're going to have a way back once they get into the city, and they have options on the way to work. Right now, there's just not enough trains leaving the Danbury station currently to, provide that comfort to a commuter. If you're going to make the commitment to use a train, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to take a train and get back. And there's practically a train into the Harlem station in Southeast every 25 minutes. So, and it goes until almost 3 a.m. So that kind of reliability and comfort level is what a commuter is looking for. And which is why there's this mass migration over the border into that area to take the Harlem line. If we had more trains out of Danbury now, maybe that wouldn't be the case, but we're not going to see, even though they talk about it, we're not going to see more trains from Danbury going into on the current southern route into New York. If we do, they're going to add 1 or 2, and that's really not going to help.
Right.
Using the southern route into Stamford is terrific. If you have to go to Stamford for $4.75, you can get to Stamford one way, and it's an absolute perfect solution if you travel into the southern part of Connecticut. But if you need to get into New York from our region, and I'm talking about Ridgefield, Danbury, and points north, it always is over into New York City, over to New York State side, which is why New York embarked on this, help partner with us and get this study presented in the first place, because they don't want to see this migration either. They can't afford to add more parking or do any more of that, because they're seeing
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, well, let me
I'll
ask
just
you
add
about the
quickly,
idea. Has there been
Francisco.
much discussion as to where a station would be located in Danbury, if there would be more than one station? Has there been much thought along those lines?
Exit 2 would be a stop on the train that's being planned now. So it would be downtown Danbury, which would then become a hub.
Yep.
And if you add in the TOD work or studies result into that equation, that would be bus, cab, Uber, and
Right.
Metro North train hub. So everything will be there, and then we'll go from there and have one stop at exit 2.
Exit 2.
And that's right in the area, which is where you're seeing all the growth you just mentioned. And then on to Southeast.
Right.
The study that New York is doing right now is considering both Metro North stops on the Harlem line, Brewster and Southeast as options, but it looks from the last meeting or last 2 meetings that I was involved in there that the Southeast station is going to be the suggested terminus of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
So you set the next slide up pretty well when you talked about TOD, because that it just strengthens the opportunity for really pursuing this TOD plan that is now was 2019 plan, and there's a tremendous vision and a roadmap that was laid out within that plan, and this could be a catalyst that helps to bring some of that vision to reality. So I wonder if anyone else has thoughts on how the activation of the Maybrook line might enable the realization of components of the TOD plan.
Oh, I think it's the key. I think
Yeah.
things will explode in that area around the downtown station and exit 2, even more so if they do this. It's the key.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think it's certainly well within the range of things that we need to be thinking about within the POCD to strongly advocate for both the Maybrook line and the role that this plays in supporting the TOD. Okay. All right. Well, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Eric for a little while. He and his team have dug deep into the numbers. Once again, just trying to get our fingers on the pulse of the trends that are occurring in Danbury and put some hard numbers to the perception and better understand what's happening. And some of this is sensitive to the past year and a half, particularly with unemployment. But I'll let Eric get into that, into the details of that.
Great. Thanks, Francisco. And I think the overview that you provided here on kind of the current status, not only of partners who are working with the city around economic development, but also the successes that you mentioned is a great segue into kind of diving into some of the data. So similar to the housing study that I think some of you or many of you saw a couple months ago, hoping to dive a little bit into the data so that we can better understand what's been happening and the current trends for Danbury around economic development, as a way to then pose some questions to you about the future and sort of what we should be including and thinking about as part of the economic development chapter, as well as other chapters which economic development touches as part of the POCD. So just first off, I wanted to share with you a little bit about Danbury's labor force, or in other words, basically the number of residents in Danbury who are over the age of 16 and classified as either employed, currently employed, or unemployed. Danbury's labor force is just under 43,000 as of, 45,000 as of September 2021, and comprises about 10% of Fairfield County's total. The graph here shows unemployment over the last 10 years, and you can see that even during the challenging economic recessions back in the 08 to 10 range and the current 2020 pandemic, Danbury's unemployment was lower than both the county and the state, and has actually come down substantially since the high point during the early part of the pandemic. I think as Francisco and certainly Roger were mentioning before, I think recovery appears to be in full swing here in Danbury, which is great news. So one question that we were asking ourselves is, what makes Danbury so resilient to these economic shocks? For one, Danbury is an employment destination where about 5,000 more employees are traveling into the community for work compared to those who are leaving to work elsewhere, as evidenced by the map and graphic on the right. Danbury is also very unique in that about 33% of Danbury working residents remain in the city for their job. From my perspective and working in other communities, that is a really high percentage. This sort of positive inflow of workers not only supports the employers that are here in the city, certainly, but it also kind of creates a strong daytime population and a set of employees that ends up spending money at local establishments like retailers, service providers, and restaurants. The residents of Danbury who are in the labor force are commuting to nearby locations in both Connecticut and New York. A little over 64% of Danbury residents travel to jobs within Fairfield County. And then that's followed by about 7% for Westchester County, New York, and about 7% for New Haven County in Connecticut. So this means the roadway and the transit connections to and from and within Danbury, connecting to the different places of employment, are really important considerations for the POCD and ways in which we might think about linking economic development, the land use and zoning component, and the transportation component of the POCD. The map on the right then shows the distances and the directions that Danbury residents are commuting. About 51% of working Danbury residents commute less than 10 miles to work, with another 24% commuting between 10 and 24 miles. I think the strength of Danbury's economy and also the diversity of industries here provide a lot of different opportunities for residents to both live and work within relative close proximity to each other. We know that this helps cut down on commuting costs, time spent away from family, and also fewer vehicle emissions. So it's good for the environment as well. The next few slides are a reminder to what we had discussed in the housing presentation, but I thought it was worth mentioning again. Education and income are integrally linked, and on the education side, very important to supporting a diverse and prepared workforce. As we noted before, Danbury does lag Fairfield County in terms of educational attainment, with about 55% of residents with a bachelor's degree or higher compared to the county, which is at about 69%. But as we see here, educational attainment in Danbury is increasing actually pretty rapidly, particularly for those with an associate's degree or some level of college, as well as those earning a bachelor's degree or higher. Those last two categories are still a bit lower than the county, but they're increasing, which is a great sign. On the income side, we see a similar story where households with low to moderate incomes are a little bit more prevalent in Danbury, higher income households being more prevalent in the county. This is not necessarily a bad thing, and it actually aligns pretty closely with the wide range of occupations that residents hold, whether they work in the city or not. However, kind of on the flip side, the city has seen a pretty large percentage growth in those upper income households over the last 10 years, with households in the top 3 income cohorts there on the right side of the graph, increasing anywhere between 20% and 57% respectively. The growth in the households earning at or above $200,000 did outpace the county, although I'll note that the county did start with a larger number overall, so that's why their percentage is a little bit lower. So for us, I think that kind of begs the question, what industries are people working in the city? As you can see, healthcare continues to lead the way with an estimated 8,500 jobs in 2021, comprising about 23% of the jobs within the city. This is then followed by the retail sector, jobs in government, manufacturing, and professional and technical services, which is also kind of your office jobs, research jobs, engineering type jobs. It's worth noting that 3 of the top 5 industries with the highest levels of employment have average salaries of more than $100,000. So a lot of these are well-paying jobs. To get a sense of where the business clusters are located around the city, we mapped employment data based on the 2018 employment and commuting data that we were showing before from the census, which shows major clusters of both large and small employers in the downtown area. Sort of in this area here, you can see the big cluster of both large and small circles. And then larger employment nodes out toward the Danbury Fair Mall, the western sections of I-84, and the kind of Federal Road, Newtown Road area. This map, just to be clear, doesn't depict individual businesses, but instead the number of jobs that are located in each of the census blocks across the city, and then the size of the circle indicates how many jobs are located within those census blocks. But again, a really strong connection sort of east and west running along 84. This graphic here looks at employment change by industry sector between the years of 2010, 2021. So the vertical bars, the blue bars that are going up, represent total employment by each of the industry sectors in 2010 and then again in 2021, while the orange horizontal line represents the percentage change year over year in total employment for the city. So over the last 10 years, employment in Danbury dropped by about 5%. Some of this decline is related to the pandemic, particularly in retail, accommodations, food services, and other types of personal services. Other drops like manufacturing were actually occurring before the pandemic. This was part of a broader trend, of course, both regionally and nationally, though. You can see the significant gains in jobs in healthcare, professional and scientific industry, and administrative and support service sectors. So then we were thinking about the pandemic, and so we recreated the same graphic for the time period of 2010 to 2019 to account for those trends that might have been happening prior to the pandemic. And here we see that employment actually over that time period rose by about 2%, with the city gaining almost 2,900 jobs over that 9-year period. We note that the pandemic influenced sectors really heavily, like accommodations and food services, retail, and also manufacturing, with a loss across all those sectors of just under 1,900 jobs. Some of these jobs are expected to come back, and as we've seen from Francisco's earlier presentation, there's a lot of activity in the city, not just in healthcare, but also in some of these manufacturers, which is really exciting to see. And on the retail and sort of accommodation side of things, we also know that a lot of those businesses, not just locally, but nationally, are having a really hard time finding employees to backfill those jobs. Even if they want to hire, they're having a really hard time finding people to take those jobs again. So here we dive a little bit deeper and look at industry employment at the 4-digit NAICS code level. The information we presented before was at the 2-digit level, to find out a little bit more specifically what industries are growing. And here we see that 3 of the top 10 highest employment industry sectors are related, not surprisingly, to education and healthcare. This list also includes a mix of both lower and higher paying jobs, including several lower paying averages in sectors like individual and family services, restaurants, grocery stores. So as we start to think about jobs and earnings and salaries, we want to be able to then connect it to, I think, affordability, both on the housing side, which we've discussed, and then also on the transportation side. How can we make it easier and more affordable for people to get from home to the jobs that they hold? This graph shows the employment sectors that grew the most over the last 10 years. This again includes individual and family services, which you can see skyrocketed over the last 10 years, gaining about 2,200 jobs, but also higher paying sectors like scientific researchers and physicians. In addition to jobs by industry sector, we also really like to look at occupations to find out not only what industry people work in, but what are they actually doing when they come into work on a day-to-day basis. The top 10 occupations by employment count I think tell a very different story than the industry sector employment data. Here we see most of the top 10 highest employment occupations paying salaries below $45,000 a year. The exception being management positions, which average nearly $180,000 a year. Occupations like home health aides, retail workers, cashiers, cleaning services, these are likely related to employers in locations like the hospital, the university, the mall, maybe the school district, things like that. This graph then shows the changes by occupation over the last 10 years. And again, we see occupations in healthcare support, sales and retail support really leading the way. But interestingly though, occupations like software developers, medical assistants, medical service managers are also starting to emerge. So now we'll shift gears and start to look a little more closely at actual employers and businesses. Here we see a breakdown of businesses by the industry sectors that they most closely identify with. We compare Danbury's business mix to that of the county in the graphic on the right. And we see a lot of parity between the two, except Danbury greatly outpacing the county in construction companies, interestingly enough, and exceeding the county in healthcare, retail, administrative, and support services. Danbury is lagging the county in some of the higher paying industries like professional and technical services, finance and insurance, and very minimally in information and management of companies. We do know though that the narrative is changing and Danbury is securing more companies in some of those higher paying sectors. So, and I apologize for the complexity of this, but I hope that when we send this presentation, you can take a minute and look at it, because I think it's probably the best graphic that we have in here, in my opinion. But when we look at employment and the business mix, we also like to look at how Danbury's local economy presents different strengths and weaknesses compared to a larger geography. And in this case, we use Fairfield County. So for this, we use a metric called location quotient, which compares employment by industry in Danbury to employment by industry in the county. And it allows us to look for concentrations or specializations of industry sectors locally that could then point to opportunities. A location quotient that's over 1.0 indicates a stronger representation of that industry locally in Danbury. Lower than 1.0 indicates an industry that is not well represented compared to the larger region or the county in this case. So for Danbury, we created this graphic that shows the location quotient of different industry sectors on the vertical axis, so going up and down. So the higher up that blue circle is in the graphic, the more specialized the industry in Danbury. We also map the industry based on annual employment growth or decline across the horizontal axis going left to right. This way we could identify which industries are specialized, but also are they growing? Are they staying the same? Are they shrinking? If an industry, say like healthcare, is both specialized and growing, this could indicate a real competitive advantage and maybe suggest to the city that this is a sector they might want to invest more time and energy into. Sectors like professional and technical services is one that's not, at least right now, specialized in Danbury, but it's growing, which could indicate a target industry to market to, or one that seems to be emerging locally. In Danbury, we see a few emerging opportunities to consider for the Pocd, which include professional and technical services and also sort of administrative and support services. Both have been growing in the last 10 years, but don't necessarily have a high concentration of employment locally compared to Fairfield County. But with the emergence of advanced manufacturing and advances in healthcare and healthcare services, these could offer really interesting targets for the city to market to going forward. Here we look at the top 20 largest employers in the city. And before I get into this, I have to make a side note that this list does still need a little bit of work. I've been working with Sharon and Roger. I need to try and just find 5 minutes to get with you after this presentation. As the data that we pulled from the Department of Labor from the state was definitely not accurate once we did some more research. And then this list represents our in-house data source, which is Database USA, which I know is also not perfect, but I actually think this list is a little bit better than the one we had pulled from the state. So anyway, I just wanted to say that this list, I hope, provides some good indicators about the largest businesses and sort of the industry sectors that they're representing. And then we can work to refine them as we go forward. But we see a really good representation within the education, government, manufacturing, healthcare, and retail sectors. Manufacturers in the healthcare and also in the energy spaces seem to be emerging in the city, which I think are really great targets going forward. Both healthcare and energy, I don't think, show many signs of slowing. And with the infrastructure bill, we may actually continue to see boosts in alternative fuel sources, batteries, fuel cells, things like that. So I think those might offer some potential targets going forward. The map on the right also, similar to the employment cluster map we showed earlier, just shows the approximate location of those top 20 employers. So this kind of led us to our next question, which is, why are companies locating here and growing here in Danbury? As Francisco noted earlier, the city's doing a great job marketing itself. It's also well located from a transportation perspective and proximity to several major markets. We also learned from our stakeholder conversations that the city's mill rate is quite a bit lower than many of its competitors in Connecticut, as evidenced here in the table. We just picked a couple of larger communities and potential competitors in and outside the county to compare the city to. With a mill rate of about $27.60, the city is quite a bit lower than many of the other larger communities like Waterbury, Hartford, New Haven, but it's also right in line with Norwalk and Stamford, some of our Fairfield County competitors. I think this is great news for the city, and the residential to commercial share of real property taxes continues to decline for residents, which from my perspective, I think is good for the tax bills too. So for companies that want to locate here or even grow here once they're located here, where can they go? Is it easy to find space? For that, we started looking at the business, commercial, and industrial districts in the city to see how they align with current business location patterns. The map on the right shows the zoning districts where commercial and industrial are permitted and encouraged. Here we see big swaths along the I-84 corridor in and around the downtown, south of Route 7, with industrial districts kind of pushed a bit further out east and west, with then pockets of these kind of commercial and supportive corridors in between. I think one big question that's come up earlier is there enough area to support future business growth, and can prospective businesses find available sites, so parcels of land and or buildings that they can move into, grow within, expand upon. We also wanted to get a better understanding with regard to the amount of existing commercial and industrial development that's actually built today, where those are located, how much land and building space are we actually talking about, and the values of those uses. So for that, and again, this is different than the zoning that we looked at before. This is actual parcel-based data from the city's assessor's database. So what actually exists today on the ground. In total, the city has about 17 million square feet of commercial space and about 5.7 million square feet of industrial space on the ground. Those are constructed on about 4,000 acres of land, generating about $57 million in property taxes a year. Interestingly, and something that kind of came up earlier when Francisco was talking, the Danbury Fair Mall is about 1.6 million square feet, give or take, or about 41% of the city's total retail square footage. It accounts for about 54% of the retail assessed value citywide. Contributes about $8.7 million in taxes too. So one kind of interesting question to consider is if the mall should go through a period of higher vacancy at some point, or a change in use, or even a sale of the property, what kind of implications does that have from a taxing standpoint for the city? We also use the city's assessment data to look at the year built for commercial and industrial structures, and we are showing that on the map to the right. About 26% of commercial structures were built prior to 1930, mostly in that downtown area, which you would expect, while the majority of industrial buildings were tended to be built after 1960. Not surprisingly, the distributions of the buildings by age kind of fans out from the downtown, with the older buildings toward the center, the newer ones heading toward the periphery of the city, as the building footprints and the sort of built environment was expanded over time. So as we think about these buildings as assets and opportunities, I think we need to consider what upgrades may be needed to things like power systems, water and sewer, especially today, HVAC systems and mechanicals, sprinklers, elevators, to make sure that the buildings are both up to code, but also, and probably more importantly, attractive to today's users and the users of the future. And lastly, to wrap up, we wanted to get a sense of how industrial and commercial real estate is performing in the county. Here, we really see some strong activity for the year to date in 2021, with net absorption of industrial space up to about 195,000 square feet, and industrial rents pushing just over $9 a square foot. Vacancy is also down to about 8% countywide, all really healthy indicators that the industrial market in the county is performing quite well. And locally, we know industrial space is doing well with the recent lease of the Amazon facility. And then to wrap up on the commercial side, the graphic on the bottom left shows the office rents for Class A, B, and C spaces, as well as retail rents. Interestingly, Class A has actually come down a bit over the last 10 years, while the Class B and Class C spaces kind of come up from a rent perspective. This was occurring prior to the pandemic, and it'll be really interesting to see how these things like work from home or sort of a hybrid work environment and also social distancing end up impacting the office market overall. The graphic on the bottom right shows vacancy trends since 2010. And you can see that Class A office space has sort of been steadily increasing, which could be an indicator of why rents have come down a bit, while Class B and C is sort of maintained around that 17%. Retail vacancy is up a little bit, but I would anticipate that to adjust post-COVID. And you can already see the 2021 numbers starting to dip down a bit from the high in 2020. So that's the end of that presentation. And similar to the housing one, we put together just a couple of questions based on Francisco's presentation at the beginning and some of our data work, just things that we'd like to kick around with you all, things that might help to inform the POCD going forward.
Yeah, let's dive into that. Maybe we could take these one at a time, and we don't have to exhaust it. This can be food for thought for you. But if someone has a real strong sense as to what some of these answers might be, or what we should be thinking about, feel free to chime in. So starting with the first one, the unemployment rates are low. But is there anything that the city should be doing or the POCD can do to support all those jobs coming back to Danbury?
One thing, and PJ still on, maybe a question for him too around this. One thing we didn't touch upon is sort of workforce development initiatives. I know he mentioned work with the local WIB. So I could see maybe there's a component of workforce development too, and sort of growing back those jobs that might have been lost from COVID and continuing the success that the city's seeing. Any issues around, having that workforce and the workforce availability.
This is Arnie. I'm not. That's a tough question to answer because COVID is still relatively new, and this whole idea of this exodus of people leaving office buildings and working home, it's still new, and it still has stood the test of time. And there's a growing sentiment that you're just not as productive sending your entire workforce home or half your workforce home. But it's just, in my opinion, it's way too early to answer that question because we have to see what direction COVID goes in. If it's completely gone and everyone feels good, I see jobs coming back to large office buildings just by virtue of that. But it's too early to tell.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's fair. Okay, well, let's talk about manufacturing in the city. The jobs numbers would suggest to us that manufacturing jobs have decreased. I don't think we could identify one single business that significantly contributed to that, unless we're not aware of a large business that left Danbury or went out of business. So is there anything that the city could do or the POCD could do to support increasing or stabilizing the loss of manufacturing jobs? Or do you folks feel that this is just, it's a changing landscape across the region and jobs are just, the nature of jobs are changing? So let's just continue to go in the direction that those trends are headed.
It's really amazing how much stuff Danbury used to make, from lipstick containers to ballpoint pens and 8-track tapes.
Yep.
A lot of that stuff winds up in Asia, where the cost of manufacturing is so cheap and so automated. But some of the stuff in Connecticut, anyway, is still kind of handmade. And I'm talking about like high-tech defense. A lot of that stuff does not really lend itself well to automation. And if we have in our backyard, but not in Danbury, but just outside of Danbury, firms, small firms, 5 employees, 12 employees, 17 employees working in defense, it does lend itself to thinking about inviting some of those companies with maybe some incentives into Danbury. I mean, they're right here anyway. It's not like they've got to ship employees from Scottsdale to Danbury. They can ship them from Enfield to Danbury, and it might actually work. With a new train, highway, airport, we possibly could do some of that stuff. But I mean, I think the short answer to that is just to keep growing the grad list.
But I agree with what Paul Rotello this is Arnie. I agree with what Paul Rotello just said. But I mean, we have to, remember the very, very high cost of doing business in Connecticut, whether it's health insurance rates, workers' compensation rates, the cost of housing. I just don't see a big influx of manufacturing back to Danbury. My grandparents were hatters, but the hatting industry ain't coming back anytime soon. And I do see an opportunity for some ultra high tech manufacturing. Somebody mentioned Parker Medical earlier. I mean, high voltage cables for extremely delicate medical technology, that's fine. But in terms of like a big influx of manufacturing jobs, I'm not sure there's anything we can do.
I just keep wondering about the potential to cluster around the healthcare industry or the energy field or other advanced manufacturing fields. I agree with you, Arnie. I don't think the kind of traditional manufacturers are coming back either here or to the US, although maybe in some parts, but probably not in Connecticut. So yeah, is there an opportunity to court kind of more of these high-tech advanced manufacturing firms that they may not have as many employees, but what they're doing and what they're making is central to some of the other industry sectors that have a high presence in the state of Connecticut or just across the border in New York?
Well, that's exactly it. And this is PJ, and I apologize, I'm mobile at the moment, but if we could couple together more of these Parker Medicals, as Arnie talked about, that's 88,000 square feet. That's 80 employees. If we could sort of continue to find those potential opportunities, granted they were a relocation from New Milford, from Bridgewater down to Danbury, but if we can continue on that trend, I don't see why we shouldn't put some time, energy, and effort into manufacturing. I mean, I think we've got a ample workforce specifically within the city of Danbury in the greater Danbury area to provide those jobs. We've actually, and I mentioned this in my earlier conversation about the chamber in general, we're working with the workforce board, the Northwest Regional Workforce Board, specifically on a next gen sector partnership. And we've identified 2 areas of industry, manufacturing and healthcare, to try to further engage to see how we can grow opportunities for them, not just the existing companies, but to potentially attract additional manufacturers in healthcare industries as well. So that actually might be something we would kind of bring in at some point, because we're starting kind of in the beginning stages of this partnership that I think could have some relevance to this conversation.
Yeah, very much so. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, do we agree that the healthcare sector will likely continue to be an area of growth for Danbury, a promising area of growth?
Francisco, if I could ask a question.
Yeah, Tim, go
Going
ahead.
back to manufacturing. How much does a company look at the rate of being able to move through the city, both on the highway and on local roads for moving that product? Is that something that's, looked at and said, you know what, we have to get off local roads. These local roads are not set up for the traffic that we're looking at, which means that there's only certain corridors that they could possibly build a manufacturing facility in. And do we have to look at improving our local roads to an area so that manufacturing can flow in and out? And I don't know the answer to that, but it sounds like it should be a component of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends what type of manufacturing as well, right? It depends on the volume, the bulk, how are those goods transported? What type of vehicles? Do you need freight rail?
Parking for employees.
Oh, that's
All the
Tim.
way-
That's what it is. So it's employees. The conversations I've been having with manufacturers, with healthcare, with construction, it's employees, it's talent. And if we could, assist in that capacity, I think they're willing to, bang their head against their steering wheel being in traffic for 30 minutes. Talent is the number one thing that's coming up. I mean, obviously exacerbated by COVID, but even prior was always priority number one for these employers.
Okay. All right. I do take your point though, Tim. You need the infrastructure to be able to support that sector. And the question is, does Danbury's infrastructure, will it support something that demands on a lot of transportation of goods and raw materials?
I have a comment about the labor or the workforce, and maybe something as far as reaching out to the local or state level as far as apprenticeship programs go for some of these trades in the manufacturing that we're looking to bring here, or the question to solve that answer. Maybe that's something to look into as far as like Henry Abbott Tech or something at the state level that can help us bring some more trades into the city to help with that lack of manpower.
Roger, I wonder if you or PJ could talk a little bit about any knowledge you have of apprenticeship programs, trade programs that are potentially feeders to the local workforce. Roger, anything, or PJ?
Yep. Yeah. First of all, I'm a graduate of Henry Abbott Technical School. That's one place that I definitely think we underutilize. That is a feeder. It always was, and it should be, accessed more. We do have also, the city is planning the career academy over on the west side there. That's going to be our new middle and high school. That's going to have a focus on technical and other trades as well, to try to generate an option for our youth, as they decide on a career path. We also I deal with DCD on a regular basis, trying to, dig into exactly what we can do, not just in Danbury, but as a state, to energize that thought, for our youth to understand that there's more than, your regular college-based, decision when you get into your, making your decision and to figuring out what your career is going to be. And there are these jobs that I know one time we had it wasn't long ago, Mark Boughton had about 50 businesses come to Danbury, and they are not come to Danbury, but they're from Danbury and in the region. And they came in and we had a presentation on the economy in Danbury and what the pros, what they were experiencing. And, one of the biggest needs that these businesses presented was skilled work pool of people. So a lot of it went into, we need technical people. We need, anywhere from electricians to plumbers to whatever the need was there. And we have seen, I have been in contact with these people. They are finding that they are able to, they're seeing improvement, but there's still a ways to go on backfilling these positions, and especially since COVID. So we're working closely with the state on that to deal with that on a more statewide level, not just in Danbury.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Roger. Thank you. All right, so there's the workforce aspect. Let's change gears a little bit because we've got a question here about downtown and the role it plays in economic development, and really as the core of Danbury, providing that vibrancy and excitement that draws people to the city. So talk to me a little bit about what the downtown needs. Is it missing anything? How can it fully develop and be supportive and attractive as a place for arts and culture and tourism? What is missing? What needs to be done? Where's the work that remains?
I think the first thing that we got to recognize is that Danbury's been amazingly successful compared to the other 168 cities and towns in Connecticut, with a relatively moribund downtown. And that's a question in and of itself. You look at some of these other successful cities like Norwalk and New Haven and places like that, they have wildly successful downtowns, and they are also successful. We don't. We need to recognize that, but it hasn't seemed to have affected our ability to bring companies to Danbury and to bring people into Danbury. So those two things may not be quite as connected as some people might think. Certainly the evidence suggests otherwise in Danbury, and I'm not, by the way, implying that we can forget about our downtown. I just don't think that those two items are as tightly coupled as other people do, judging by what I've been seeing in Danbury over the last 25 years. That's just something I wanted to point out.
This is Arnie. I agree with Paul on this issue. We've talked a lot about the positives in Danbury early in the presentation. Amazon coming to Danbury, new vans, everything. All these great positive business moves, but downtown hasn't followed that trend to success. It's really too bad. Even with all the investment in residential in downtown Danbury, Kennedy Flats, the other big building going up now. The college. I guess downtown Danbury just has a lot of very old buildings owned by people that just don't want to invest in them, or don't have a vision for the future, or don't really want to make a major investment and see it go south. I don't know. Are there a lot of very good restaurants in downtown Danbury? Is there like the New Haven Palace, or some of even Waterbury's got a very good venue. But we don't have that in Danbury. We've got the same old palace that I used to go to when I was a kid. It's the same. Right. So it's too bad that downtown it hasn't had the renaissance that we all hoped it would. I think maybe Paul just said, Norwalk has, and some other larger cities have. So I don't know what to do about it.
This is Richard. I agree with Arnie and with Paul. I don't see any strategic plan or planning or blueprint to renovate or rejuvenate the downtown. It seems to be a hodgepodge or a hit or miss. One of the issues there are parking. You'd like to make it maybe a street where you can access things by, having sidewalks and walkways. But and then, as Ernie said, there are a lot of old buildings there that if you're going to plan to renovate downtown, you're going to have to do something to get rid of those old buildings and put something in its place. Mix it up with retail or mix it up with housing. But I'm not seeing any comprehensive plan, even a blueprint on a theoretical basis, as to how conceptually you would like to see it. So it just seems to be hit and miss. And there are periods of time over the years where there seems to be a surge to promote it and invest in it. Just a number of years ago, I think there was some, I forget what it's called, some tax incentive to invest in the area. You had some deferring of capital gains taxes.
Mhm.
So, but I think until we come up with a plan, I don't think you're going to see it grow very quickly. And
I'd like to add something.
Yeah,
Good. This is Arnie. A plan is great, but if you've got old big buildings in key locations downtown, and the owner isn't interested in renovating or demolishing or removing or updating them, there's nothing you can do. You could have the greatest plan in the whole world, but if the owners of the buildings that are really located in strategic locations say, "Thank you very much for your input, I'm not interested," there goes your plan. So that's tough.
Yep, you're 100% right. But at least with a plan, you'd be able to educate or sell that plan to those people. And then after a period of time, if the general consensus is they want to keep it as is, well, I would just say, okay, keep it as is, and not start, the conversation of developing it, which is not going to be a productive enterprise. So
yeah.
Yeah, so let's go to PJ and Bridget and PJ.
Bridget and then PJ, yeah. Bridget, go ahead.
Okay, so my quick commentary on that is that in the 23 years that I've been downtown, we've had multiple plans, multiple fantastic ideas about how to change, economically incentivize, do all kinds of work downtown. But when we define downtown, it usually stops at Elmwood. So we use the Main Street revitalization, corridor, or we talk about city center, all of which, have great ideas and are great plans. But downtown is a lot more than just a few blocks in the center of Main Street. And so, and I'm being a little facetious because I know that the borders of both of those, organizations are a little bit larger, but we don't tend to have. We look at some of the older historic structures on Main Street whose revitalization we would all hope would happen, and who we all know, if they could be economically incentivized to grow or change, would make a massive impact on downtown. And it's frustrating for those of us who live and work within that space to see some of these plans not come to fruition, and also to see that these plans are not as all-encompassing as they could be. So when we talk about downtown, I think we have to have a really sincere discussion about what downtown is. It can no longer be, the intersection of Main Streets and a couple key corridors. It has to be the entire street. It has to be the entire area around Main Street. I preach this conversation all the time. And when you talk about downtown is when you talk to people. I live, in a different part of Danbury. And when I talk about downtown, people tend to think of like 4 blocks. That's not downtown. So if we want to see downtown revitalized, I would propose 2 things. A, we need to change the definition of what downtown is. And B, we need to bring people in on the idea that downtown is more than just a place to walk quickly to the library or walk quickly to the museum. And by the way, we saw an over 300% growth in adult attendance at the museum this summer within 2 months. So it's not that people aren't coming, which is an incredible statistic that I just had to report to the state. Like it's an insane number, but people are utilizing downtown, but they don't come downtown in a cohesive way. They come downtown to visit spot locations. And that has to change as well. We need people to enjoy downtown in more than 45-minute spurts, or a quick drop in at the library, or a quick drop in at the train museum, or a quick drop in at the Danbury Museum. It is more, we talk about comprehensive planning. I know there've been a lot of good plans, but I think that they were stymied by the physical structure of the area that was represented, and that area needs to be bigger. So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Bridget. PJ?
Yeah, thank you. Well, again, I apologize for being mobile here, but well said, Bridget. Completely agree with you in terms of the expanding the definition of downtown. I would just go back to some of the conversations we had earlier on, which is the time, energy, and effort that went into the transit-oriented development. We spent a lot of time and resources in terms of identifying properties that were key for development, and to many of the conversations that we talked about now, we went into very specific metrics in terms of how these properties could move in terms of the incentives and what would be needed in terms of parking. So I would encourage those that haven't had a chance to kind of dive deep into that information to do so, because there's a lot of value to that. And I don't want to steal Roger's thunder. I know that he's been in conversation with several key stakeholders in downtown about potentially moving forward on some of these proposals. But to go back to the residential, I think the Kennedy Flats is sort of a drop in the bucket in terms of what kind of impact we want to see. Certainly positive and heading in the right direction, but we're not going to see that critical mass with just 375 apartments being built. Add the 150 across the street from these times, heading in the right direction. But again, it's getting to that critical mass where we need to see several of these projects going on simultaneously, not 3 or 4 years apart. And adding to that with the recent announcement of the investment that Savings Bank of Danbury is making into the corner of White and Main Street. And that's we talk about an iconic location, Feinson's taking that building down and then going 4 stories up. I mean, that's the kind of, and not just residential, but commercial and businesses being located, bringing in the demand of employers that are there during 9 to 5 as well, I think is a part of the big picture that we need to focus on.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just jump in too. So I was sitting quiet on my hands as well, just to, take a look at the TOD plan. Again, we did spend a lot of time and effort on that plan and came up with some really good recommendations, many of which we have implemented already and we continue to work on. We looked at, to Bridget's point, a bigger area than what we normally think of as being downtown, or just a couple of blocks, or just City Center Danbury, or just the DRZ. We really looked at, the components and what's important in terms of transit-oriented development, and that is density and of walkability and transit options. And we looked at all those components when kind of looking at what the boundary of the TOD district could potentially be. So that's still out there, and we're continuing to work on that. But we do have plans that I think are, and in addition, we talked about the impact the Maybrook line could have in terms of economic development and what tourism means to the city. And I think all those things are wrapped up in the plan, and we can continue, we'll wrap that into the POCD, many components of it, and continue to move forward. And we have to continue to invest in our infrastructure, because this is what I preach to everybody. We don't own the buildings. Maybe we own a few buildings, but we don't own the majority of the buildings. So what can we do? And that is invest in our infrastructure so that that will help incentivize people and developers to look at properties downtown. The properties are small. In order, even Savings Bank of Danbury, you need to assemble a couple of pieces to have a substantive development. So that I agree, that is a challenge, but there's ways to overcome that.
Okay.
I think you guys said it all. So me representing City Center doesn't have to say much, but I will say, as a business that operates on that block where all this is happening, it certainly doesn't feel like things are moving slowly anymore. And to see the new sidewalks and the new work around the green it feels like there's an energy and a lot of interest in investment, really starting to come into the area. And it's exciting. So I feel like, yes, it's been slow, but we're finally getting somewhere.
And if I may, just finally, after listening to all of that, thank you very much for a lot of that was summarized, in what I was going to say. So thank you. I didn't have to say all that because I was going to. But it just in the Kennedy Flats, construction wasn't enough. PJ made that known, and everybody knew that. And now you see BRT putting up its building. That's already brought in a tremendous amount of other interest. We have, I have requests into my office for retail space on Main Street, which I'm passing along to the business owners. So people are looking, they're building, storefronts are being shown now to places to open up their business because you're bringing customers downtown. Older, buildings that we discussed, there are plans in the works for those. I can't, I'm not at liberty to discuss them at this point, but soon, and I'm talking in the very near future, you're going to see announcements for developments to continue the progress we've already been realizing here. Since the Savings Bank of Danbury and BRT have announced, the entire area around it is already becoming hot with requisitions on what kind of retail space is available. What can I do here? What can I, what kind of business can I open here? So that stuff is contagious. All the investment that the city is doing on the things that the city can invest in is very important. The TOD that PJ brought up and what Sharon just mentioned, as well as all the sidewalk improvements that are happening now and will continue all through next year, is going to create an environment for, this growth that we've all been waiting to see happen here. So I just, I asked for a little bit more patience. Bridget's comments were very well said. We do need to look further down the Main Street. We only have this one Main Street in Danbury, one. That we call Main Street. Other towns, when you go into Waterbury or all these other cities, there's multiple streets that they call Main Streets. That they have a giant intercity center. We don't have that. So we should, be grateful for what we have. It is a tremendous downtown now, and I think it's going to be so much. It's going to be the envy of the state in the very near future. So just hold out. It's happening. And if you guys have any other questions after this is over, you can contact me and I can update you on all the little projects that are happening in and around downtown and the rest of the city as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger.
One thing I've always found fascinating is the amount of activity in some of these really tiny Western Massachusetts towns like Great Barrington, Stockbridge, Lee. You go to Barrington any day of the week and there's a lot of activity there and it's packed on weekends. In Great Barrington, there's 10,000 people in that town. Lee is smaller than that. Northampton, always a lot of activity, packed on weekends. Provincetown, packed all the time. And the common denominator with all those cities, towns, villages, is a vibrant art scene. Some of the old banks, some of these old 1890s banks, when the towns were giant mining centers and things like that, have been converted to art galleries, and you walk into these huge vaults with a circular vault door, and inside there are these beautiful paintings and things like that. And people seem to come look at the art and blah, blah, blah. Art and establishment politicians don't really mix that well. Art is always sort of considered to be anarchy, and politicians, the city leaders want stability. The two things don't really mesh. But I think if we're really going to get serious about downtown Danbury, we're going to have to let our hair down, and maybe we're going to have to give a portion over to the artists and just let them throw stuff on the walls to see what sticks. This is how Soho happened. In the 1970s, Soho was a wasteland. The artists moved in, they homesteaded, they squatted. And before you knew it, you couldn't afford those buildings that they couldn't even give away a few years earlier. And it happened because of art. Same thing with Provincetown, same thing with Stockbridge, same thing with Barrington. And if we're going to make Danbury a destination, I'm not sure the destination is going to be come to Danbury to have a nice coffee. It might be come to Danbury to see some really crazy art. And I'm not saying that that's going to solve the problem. I'm saying that really needs to be considered to be part of the solution, and maybe a substantial part. I don't know how to make anarchy happen, but I think if you look at those towns and you really study the Western towns with a lot of New York plates, they're similar to Danbury in that they border New York, and they're pulling from New York. Art has always been a huge part of that, whether it's Arlo Guthrie or it's, the guy that did the magazine covers, Norman Rockwell. Something like that is basically been the spark that started it. Now it's just art. And I'm not really seeing that in Danbury, and I've never really seen a push for that. But again, I think that has to be a big component.
Okay, but can I make a comment to your comment, which I thought was
Sure.
beautifully said? And the promotion of arts in any community makes that community a more viable destination. But the big difference between Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts is how much we invest as a state in tourism. Huge monetary difference. So Massachusetts invests in tremendous tourism. Their tourism dollars are off the chart. So does New York State. Connecticut's investment in tourism is incredibly low for the amount of tourism infrastructure that we have across the state. So for me, that's a legislative issue. So yes, could the art scene in Danbury explode? Absolutely. It would be phenomenal if that happened. It would be incredible, but we need statewide tourism to make people understand what a destination Danbury is and could be. And so it's really a partnership between the city and the state. And so the question then becomes, for me at least, how do we galvanize our local elected officials to galvanize the state to turn the tourism dollars, which are few and far between, towards Danbury? That's a critical key component to getting people to understand, not just in a local way, but in a regional and nationalized way, how Danbury is and could be a tourist destination. Yes, that kind of support would be, it would be transformational. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, that's a very, very important point to make. Is we don't have the same kind of support at the state level with respect to funding or programming that that Massachusetts or New York has.
We do have a fantastic art school though at the university.
Yep.
We should try to take advantage of it.
Okay. All right. The last couple of points that I think we touched upon already. Tim kind of asked the last question directly about, do we have the infrastructure to support growth with respect to manufacturing? But let's talk about developable land. Is the availability of developable land going to be an issue for growth? Is there still land out there that can support new commercial growth or high density residential? Is it out there?
Well, I don't see a lot of it left. The vacant land that's there is environmentally challenged in other ways. I think we're going to need to look at kind of retrofitting in some instances, assemblage of land to for a developable site. I know Roger gets requests for 30,000-40,000 square feet, and we can't find that, or 5 to 10 acres. And he and I just sit here and look at a map of Danbury and see what's where, and until we hone in on a site, if we can at all. So I think that we're challenged in that respect. And I think in terms the point on industrial and commercial expansion is, the transportation network.
Right. And going back to earlier meetings we've had, we're also trying to balance growth against conservation and environmental protection at the same time.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's go on to the next slide. Next slide is just kind of a catch-all for any ideas that you might have that we have not yet discussed, or any opportunities that you see. So if there's any ground we haven't covered, we're interested in hearing it. Now's your opportunity. Have we kind of covered all the bases here? Or at least the big items, Sharon? Yeah.
I just think, we've covered a lot in this, and this conversation was really good in the presentation. And so I think, we can give people maybe a little time and come back around on this topic, but just to digest everything, we'll send around the PowerPoint and we can come back to anything.
Yeah, I have one. Danbury needs a slogan.
Branding? Yeah.
Yeah, little marketing.
Marketing and branding. Yeah.
Ed Koch to stand there and say, "I love Danbury."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Those of you who remember Ed Koch.
Ed Koch also used to stand out on the corner and say, "How am I doing?"
That's right.
Okay. Yep. All right. Anything else that jumps to mind?
Francisco, this
Helen,
question. Oops, sorry, Helen.
Helen, go ahead.
I was just thinking about, what brings people to Danbury, and I think one area we could look at is like more sports teams, events, in general, maybe, and that might, include the Palace with, more entertainment, which I think we've got, we're doing better with that for sure. But I mean, really trying to develop more excellence in sports and have, teams here that, will draw people and events.
Okay.
This is already, Helen, at one point there was talk about building a baseball stadium out at the reserve. I don't know whatever happened to that. That kind of fell apart, I guess.
That would be wonderful, but we have the Westerners and they draw some, but I mean, I guess playing, even playing up what we have, and we have, I think we have a hockey team now again, but I mean, we need more of that kind of thing because people love to go out to see teams play. I mean, I think that'd be a good draw.
Well, that's a problem because the Westerners actually won their entire division this year and nobody knows about it. They draw about 5 or 10 people a game, which is unfortunate.
Well, they've got
and that's an opportunity. That's an absolute, we must focus on that because we should be supporting them in terms of, branding and pushing, exposure and all that, more.
Can I make a comment to that?
Yeah.
You're absolutely 100% correct. 23 years ago, 20 years ago, 18 years ago, we had the regional tourism office in Danbury. And so the Westerners and other groups could turn to them to do massive publicity. There's no one entity within the city of Danbury that is doing publicity for all the arts and entertainment venues that are here. And so you have scattershot marketing and scattershot publicity. And that goes back to the branding thing that was just mentioned, which is brilliant. Yes, we need one local entity that handles the branding, the organization, and the advertisement marketing for all of these organizations. I'm not saying that all of us should stop doing our own marketing, but our own marketing is specifically targeted and we don't reach necessarily all the groups that we should be reaching. If we were banded together underneath one oversight agency that helped bring economic development in the form of entertainment that is incredibly widely publicized, that could be a massive boom to Danbury's overall economy. So that includes the sports, that includes arts, that includes any kind of entertainment that you would see across the city. Instead of competing against each other for our marketing share, we'd have one entity that's doing it. If the state's not going to do it for us, then maybe we should do it for ourselves.
Is there, could we extend that, like funding for that from the tourism dollars that the state, hasn't been giving us? I mean, can we push that button too? But I mean, I love that idea that you have coordination that you suggested.
Okay.
I guess it worked in the past, so.
It did work in the past. It was a critical blow to our arts and entertainment infrastructure when the state redeveloped the tourism districts. And so now we have really large tourism districts, and Danbury is lumped into Litchfield Hills. And so we get short shrift in our section. They try, and they're incredibly underfunded. So it's not like, I think, what is it? Connecticut is like 49th on the list of states that funds tourism and tourism infrastructure and tourism marketing. That is absurdly low. So as if we really want to push sports teams, and it shouldn't be just up to the people who are promoting hockey to promote the hockey, it should be up to all of us. To the point about the Westerners, which was a great point. They did so well. And nobody knows. So, the opportunity is there for us to organize in a way, maybe under a city department, maybe somebody in conjunction with the Office of Economic Development, maybe somebody in PJ's office whose sole goal it is to bring people to town for the entertainment that's already here. We have the infrastructure in place for, an expansion of the arts and entertainment section and sports, but we don't have the marketing. So.
Yeah, there's that, and we're about to. I mean, it's possible we might wind up losing the Eye Center, and which was so viable years ago. Big acts came to entertain, and we have expos and art events, and I would hate to see that just disappear. I think that'd be terrible. So, I mean, these are areas I think that if we could bring it back, and certainly in a coordinated manner, where that builds Danbury's reputation for the arts, basically, like Paul was saying.
Yeah, it did, and I would hate to see that go too. We may lose the authority, but I would be very much against shutting down the site itself. I might even, consider funding it, city funding it. Sort of a Danbury office of the Charles Ives Center or something like that. Bridget's entirely correct. We did have a tourism office in Danbury, and when I was making movies and TV commercials in the late 90s, it was extremely helpful. My mom had been working with Christopher Plummer trying to get the state to fund some of these productions. And she called the mayor up, and this was Mark Boughton at the time. It was like 2001, I think right around Mark's very first term, his first year in his first term. And she said, "Hey, Mark, there's no office of radio, TV, or film in Danbury." And Mark said, ever the practical guy, "Hey, Chris, why don't you start one?" And she said, "Can I?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." So she started one in her kitchen, and all of a sudden, Danbury had an office of film, TV, and radio. And the phone started ringing, and production started coming to Danbury, thinking that my mom was like a city official, which she just did this for free in her kitchen. And it worked amazingly well. So you can do something like that. It's really kind of silly, but you can do something like that and wind up, I mean, that's it, zero budget. I'm not thinking about replicating what my mom did back in, the early days because TV production's got a lot, trust me, it's gotten a lot more sophisticated in Connecticut. It was like Hooterville back then, but I mean, you threw these guys a bone and they just lapped it up. The city could do something like that. It could leverage a certain amount of funding, and probably less than $250,000, and that would take care of tourism, film, arts, and things like that, a staff, a couple of sports staff, and reach out, and you could coordinate that with the mayor's office and PJ. I think it would make a tremendous difference. It wouldn't be very expensive. It would make a tremendous difference. And every time somebody Googles Danbury and sees great concert or great arts or great something like that, it's just an added incentive to relocate to the city. And that's my thrust. Just keep growing the grand list, keep bringing these businesses and employees to Danbury, and keep giving them a reason to come here beyond the fact that we've got good transportation, or we've got good this, or we've got that. You know, we've got also other things that'll feed your spirit a little bit too. For very little money, I think it can pay tremendous dividends, but it's something that we're going to have to get serious about, because it is true that the things that we've tried so far have taken us as far as we've gotten, which is really far. But if we're going to get farther, we're going to need to start investing in some different areas, I think.
Okay. Well, I think that would be a good way to close out this discussion. We do want to give you an update on the community engagement activity. And so with that said, we'll go to the next slide and turn things over to Marcy. Marcy, it's all yours.
I just let her back in, so I don't know if she.
Oh, she
get it, but
might
let
have
me
lost
just
her
see.
line.
Yeah, she might have lost. Hold on.
Okay.
She should be here. Marcy, you here?
Hi, everyone. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, the
Sorry
floor
about-
is yours.
Okay. I thought for certain we'd be done by 5:30, but so all right. If you could advance to the next slide, and I'll just go over a little bit what we've been doing and some of our upcoming outreach activities. So we had in the past month, a little over a month, we had 3 pop-up events. 2 were at the farmers market. One was the first week of October. Another one was on the 15th. And I think at last month's meeting, I reported a little bit on what we had heard at those 2 events. We also
Marcy, did we lose you?
She went back on mute. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you now. It's been in and out, but go
Okay.
ahead, try again.
I think so. We heard a lot of the things that were raised today. In addition to what I mentioned last month, we heard a little bit about the conditions of the road and the lack of affordable housing, but then we also did hear from people how they would like to see more events at the Palace and some more tourism-based things, sports. So we did hear some of that stuff that you guys all talked about today. So I think that is something that, you know, we should log and keep note of for future reference. And just so you know, we are for now wrapping up pop-up events. It's getting colder, and our last event, we started hearing around to talk to us as much.
And Marcy, I don't know if it's just my line, but your line, at least I'm hearing it's kind of in and out.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so yeah, just try to plow through it while you have a good connection. We'll go to the next.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the survey, so far we have had about over 900 people respond to the survey. Some really good things we're hearing back. We appreciate everyone filling it out. We are going to keep this open until a few weeks past our December workshop, which I'll get into in the next slide. So the public workshop, we're in the process of planning for this now. And it's going to be on Thursday, December 2nd, in person at the Palace. And we will follow up the following week with an online Zoom workshop with same content for those who do not want to or cannot attend on the 2nd. And Sharon, I will reach out to you if it's okay tomorrow to start to talk a little bit more about further notifications and outreach announcing the meeting.
Sure, that's fine.
Great. And then finally, we are going to also be doing some focus groups in January, and I think Francisco and others will be looking to reach out to you a little bit. Those are going to be very topic specific, and we'll continue planning them after we have our workshop. The idea is to have more detailed, in-depth discussions on subject matter, on particular subject matter. So if you have things that you're certain we need to be talking about, some of them might come out of our workshop. And there's people that you know absolutely have to be involved. We will continue that discussion over the next month as we plan them.
Yeah, if I could just
And I
jump in as
believe-
well. Yeah, Marcy, the list that we've been accumulating since kind of the get-go, probably, wow, a year ago now, that you've given us names and organizations. I mean, that's who we will be reaching out to relative to the workshop, the evening, and then these individual topic area groups. So, you know, that's what Jen and I and my staff are trying to do to, you know, get people involved and to come out to speak either, you know, on everything or on a specific topic.
Okay, and then our next slide. Thanks, Marcy. I'll take it from here. We're also making progress towards the affordable housing plan. We're on a parallel process with that. And we will also host a workshop specific to that plan, and that will be January 24th. So that last week of January begins a full week of meetings relevant to the affordable housing plan and the POCD. So please, you know, mark your calendar if you're interested in joining us to talk about affordable housing. It's at the Danbury Library at 6 p.m. on the 24th. And of course, we'll be launching a bunch of promotion associated with that as well. In addition, with a survey specific to affordable housing in the first week of January, once we've had a chance to wrap up and close out the POCD survey so the two aren't confused. Okay. And if we go to the next slide, we're making progress. We keep moving steadily towards developing the plan and getting closer towards, you know, really wrapping up the process. We're at a really important point right now with this meeting in that we've really concluded much of our discovery and existing conditions work and all that mapping and data collection. And now we need to start turning that into a plan. So our future meetings are going to start to change a little bit in nature. And we're really going to have to get into identifying priorities and goals for the plan. So there'll be more working sessions, a little less presentation in nature. And that's the phase that we're moving into. And next slide. So our very next steps we'll be very focused on preparing for both the December workshop and the January meetings. And we'll be soon, as Marcy mentioned, we're going to close out the survey a couple weeks after the December workshop. Those workshops are always good at drawing some attention to the planning process. We very often get press, so we want to keep the survey open for when we get some press and attention from the workshop, so that if people hadn't heard about it or hadn't taken the survey, they can take it then. But then we want to close it out. We're really eager to digging into all of that feedback and sharing it with you at a future meeting. It's always really, really interesting and informative. And as I mentioned, we're starting to think about the plan itself. So we're going to put together a plan outline and start to share with you how we see the plan coming together and being organized. And that's what we're working on now. And our next meeting, as a reminder, is on Tuesday, December 24th at 4 o'clock. And that will afford us an opportunity to review the outcome of the workshops and to go over the survey findings as well. Okay. Well, that concludes our meeting this evening. So thank you very much for sticking with us. I know we went a little bit long, but the discussion was really informative for us, and I hope you found it interesting, and I hope it stimulated some ideas. So thank you very much for contributing to that. And we'll follow up with the PDF of the presentation. And as always, if you have any questions or anything to add, please feel free to send an email to us, to Sharon, and we're very happy to receive anything that comes to mind after the meeting.
Do you want to reconsider that December 24th date since it's Christmas Eve?
I think it's the 21st, actually.
Yeah,
the
21st, Richard.
I'm sorry, I thought it was the 24th.
Yeah, no, we're not pulling a Scrooge on you. We're
Yeah, okay, thanks. I got
Thank
excited.
you,
I saw it
Francisco.
yeah.
Thank you. That
Sorry.
was great. Lots of great information, lots of great feedback and input from everybody. So thank you very much. I apologize again for the whole, we had to switch gears here, but it did work. And so I will take a motion to adjourn unless anybody has any comments.
So moved.
Motion by Paul, seconded by
Second.
Perry.
I'll
I see your
second.
hand
Yeah.
up. Perry, all in favor, signify by
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.